Hey, I'm Paul Stevenson from VRP Rocks, and I'm delighted to be bringing you another My Five Favorite. Now, regular viewers and listeners to VRP Rocks knows that I love My Five Favorite because, let's be honest, musical is subjective. We all have different personal feelings about songs, and we all know what songs we like, but we don't often get to hear what the musicians themselves like. So this is where we get them on and get them to give us our choices. And this week's guest has got an incredible array of choices to choose from. He's worked on so many different records from so many different artists from so many different genres as well. So I'm really looking forward to this one. So welcome back to VRP Rocks, Mr. Guy Pratt.
Hello.
Hello, Guy. How's things?
Things are good. Yeah, things are great. Can't complain, I suppose. Apart from the weather's filthy, but
Well, it is, well, I was going to say January. It's February, so we can't really
yeah,
complain.
no, but we
Absolutely.
do. Anyway,
Well, it's the British way.
yeah.
So yes, thank you so much for coming back on VRP Rocks. We had you on a couple of years ago, I think it was, to hear about your career, but this time we're getting you back on to hear about your five favorite albums that you've played on, and we're going to run through them in chronological order. So there's no hierarchy involved in this. So we're going to start
Okay.
with your first choice, 1989, and it's a little known pop star called, is it Madonna? Is that how you pronounce it?
Yes, Ciccione, something Ciccione. Yeah, that was, although it was actually recorded in 1988, but obviously, like most albums, took a while. Yeah, and well, it's because I'm on about four or five songs on the album. Um, and it was that was the first time I'd done a proper Premier League LA session,
Yes.
literally flown out to LA, all the boys, like proper grown-ups, people who playing on Steely Dan records, could run with scissors. It was, I felt a bit of I mean, it was funny because I was coming off the back of that massive Pink Floyd tour. And so I kind of had had kudos around me, but I did not feel like one of those guys at all. That was never my that was never my thing. I never wanted to be one of those I mean, but I was very happy to have it.
Mm.
Yeah, and it was an amazing experience. And of course, I ended up being on, that song, which is an absolute career defining thing for me.
Absolutely. And we should mention the album we were talking about, Like a Prayer, just in case
So
anybody doesn't
yes.
know and the song you're referring to is obviously the title track to it. So you've mentioned you've come off the back of the whole Pink Floyd tour. So how did someone get in touch with you? Was it one of Madonna's people? Was it someone from the studio? I mean, how did you get involved in this record?
No, it was Pat Leonard. Actually, I've realised that I don't know because I can't remember which albums I've chosen. I've got a nasty feeling I've missed out one that actually I should be on it. It was Pat Leonard, her writer producer, who I knew because I'd been working with him on Bryan Ferry's record, Bête Noire. That's one which I actually really, which actually, we're not talking about favorite album because was actually with the most important album in my life because actually everything comes from that album. If I think about it. I got nicked from Icehouse to play for Bryan Ferry by Rhett Davis, the producer. So Rhett is a massively important person. Once I'm there playing and Brian, I'd played for Robert Palmer before, but playing for Bryan Ferry, that was crossing the Rubicon. That was like, oh my God, this is Bryan Ferry. This is like Bowie level
Yeah.
for me, for childhood hero kind of thing. And yeah, on that album, I met all the people who had shaped my life. Chester Kamen, the guitarist, Johnny Marr, David Gilmour, and Pat Leonard. Literally everything comes. So in terms of so actually the most important album ever for me was Bête Noire by Bryan Ferry, and but it was through that I met Pat Leonard. I went out to LA and played some stuff on the album, and then spent a lot of time in London. And Pat and I really hit it off. And he came to see a Pink Floyd show towards the end of the tour and just said, "Hey,
Okay.
Guy, what are you doing at the end of this?" And I could we'd been on tour for a year. I mean, I had no conception of there being a life after. I think I was probably thought I was just going to go, I don't know, drink myself to death in a bar. I mean, I really couldn't see anything beyond this. And he said, "How do you fancy coming to play on Madonna records?" Like, what? Because actually, but she never had a bass player before. On her first two albums, there's no one plays bass.
Wow.
I think
I didn't
unless
know
maybe
that.
Nard Edwards maybe plays on one track on Like a Virgin. I probably should have researched that before I said that, but I'm pretty sure she hadn't had a bass player before. And this was so yeah, and it was with a band. I actually got to pick my own drummer. who blew me out, which got me sacked before I'd even got the gig. But then that all got sorted out somehow. Actually, thanks to God bless him, God rest him, Nick Cayman. She bumped
Oh,
into Nick
wow.
Cayman on the beach and went, I got this fucking English bass player. He can't even get a fucking, Guy Pratt. And Nick goes, oh yeah, Guy's great. No, I love Guy. So thank, eternal gratitude to Nick for that. And so yeah, I turned up and everything was cut live. It was, in live in the studio, which is
Oh,
not what I
wow.
thought recording with her would
Yeah.
be. And you just had this fucking insane band. Jonathan Moffat, Sugarfoot, the Jacksons drummer, Jay Winding playing keyboards, Pat Leonard playing keyboards as well, Bruce Gage playing guitar. I mean, this was so posh, and then all being engineered by Bill Bottrell. And it was not there were things like I was Oh Father, which is an amazing song. It's one of those songs when you read it, when you look at the chart on the page, it's like, what even is this? It's like a bar of two, bar of six, bar of then and then as soon as the vocal goes on, it goes schling into this kind of the most straightforward, simple, perfect song. But we literally the tape ran like 3 times for that. We ran it once with Madonna singing in the control room, at the end of which she gave everyone really good notes, like really
Yeah.
like proper notes in language you could understand. And then went, okay, let's do it again. And we ran it again. And that was the take. That was the whole band. That was it. And her vocal.
Oh, wow.
Then they got a string section in. They hit record once more for that. And then Chester came in and did one slide guitar overdub. That was it. That was the whole song, which is when you listen to it, it is incredible.
It is incredible. I was gonna say you kind of mentioned there that Madonna gave you notes. Now, obviously, as a pop princess as she was known and things like that. But she was very much a perfectionist when it came to the music as well, wasn't she? In the studio, so was she very, very hands-on when it came to what was recorded and the way things were played and things like that?
Yeah, very handsome. I remember on that song, Duck. I remember it was like because she actually used the phrase. She said, "Guy, just duck eggs," which is like whole notes, you know. And she said, except for that one, I'd done a film in there. Said, except for that fill within, it's like how, and then it's like Jay, don't play the bells till the second chorus, and it was literally that sort of stuff. And she'd been singing it as well.
Wow.
So yeah, no, it was
Oh,
incredibly impressive. But she could also be really funny, It'd be like I remember there was one song where Moffat was going, I'm sorry, I can't remember when do I come in? She went, you come in when I do this, and she just lifted her top up. Um, and that wasn't actually when you come in. But there's loads of, in fact, there's one song on there called "Till Death Us Do Part." And you can't really hear it. It's a real shame. The one time I ever used, because I was getting given tons of stuff at this point, and of course it was the 80s and everything was about tech and everything. And I got Kramer had given me this bass guitar, which was a 5-string bass, and it was ultimate schoolboy thing, where it was stereo, but every string was stereo. There was a pan pot for literally for every string, which you think about is kind of preposterous. But it was great. But so there's a really good bass line, which I said it's really good because I think it was actually Pat who wrote it. It's dum bam ba-do-do-do-dum, ba-do-do-do-do-dum, da-do-do-do-dum, dum ba-da-do-do-do-do-dum, ba-do-do-do-do-dum, like that. And I panned all the strings in different directions.
wow. That
So
sounds amazing.
yeah.
Very
Stuff
clever.
like that. And then the actual song, like, and there was I was Spanish Eyes. That's a great one where I remember we were just in there. We had and again that was just through a few run throughs, and we played it once. And then she said to Bruce, can you give us like a Spanish guitar intro type thing? He goes, oh, what you mean like this? He goes, yes, that's it. And there's now an intro to the song, and that's how that happened. It's all
Phenomenal stuff.
yeah, it was great. And then of course the song Like a Prayer, which I don't really remember. I just remember it was me and Madonna and Pat and Bill in the studio one afternoon, and I'm sure I thought I was just mucking about. That's like my version of the real me, the whole thing when Entwistle wasn't thought he
Yes.
wasn't being recorded. That's my real me.
I was going to ask you about that song because that is a very famous bass line and it's an incredible bass line as well. So, was that, as you're just saying, you were just mucking about, just coming off the top of your head? I mean, did you expect to go back and simplify it, or was it just a bit of fun? I mean, what was happening
Yeah,
around
I
that?
can't no because my bit because it's that because there's that because it's actually there's a synth going ding ding digga 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 just doing that bit, and so the idea was that I thought well I said well I'll just get an octave pedal and I'll double that, but then I just started throwing all this stuff in between it, and you just I'm thinking well there's a gap they'll obviously just take it out and they didn't they kept all of it like I said it's I've said it a million times but I still when I got invited back to the mix months later. And I went and sat next to Madonna in the, in the control room, and they played it back really loud. I thought, God, that sounds like me. But it can't be because it's so above my pay grade. Pino gets to do that. I don't get to do that. And I said to her, in all honesty, I went, "Wow, Madonna, I think that's the best record you've ever made, and that bass is amazing. Who is it?" She went, "You dummy!"
So you obviously patched up your relations there. Did you work with her later on different releases or
Yes, I
anything like
did.
that?
Yeah, I did one other record. I did. I played on Breathless, the soundtrack to. I played on Hanky Panky.
Ah, yes, yeah, yeah.
That's me. There's a synth bass, so I'm doubling it. And there's one other song on that I'm on. I can't remember which one. I like the story of Hanky Panky though. I love. There's a great thread to that, which is that uh, Pete Townsend loved "Let's Go Crazy" by Prince, right? And that came out when he was making the White City album. And when he wrote Face the Face, that is basically that comes from Let's Go Crazy. And it does if you think about it. Dun, 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 dun,
Yeah.
that's similar sort of thing. We all went to see The Who do this star-studded version of Tommy at the Universal Amphitheatre while we were recording the album. In fact, I went with David Gilmour because he was in town, and Pat was there with Madonna, and I mean everyone was there. It was amazing. And at the end of the show, they did Face the Face, right? And Pat was like, "Oh my God, this is amazing! I love this song," and so that's where Hanky Panky comes from.
Ah.
So you got this fantastic thing of it goes Prince to Pete Townsend to Madonna. So it's kind of like almost done a circle.
Incredible stuff. Fantastic first choice of record number one. Then let's move on to number two. And this is probably what you were wondering whether you'd included Toy Matinee. Now, I'll be honest, I've never heard of this before I
Ah,
got your list, so I was very intrigued and interested to listen to it. And very delightful it is as well, very funky as well. I like it. I really like it a lot. So tell me why this one's one of your choices and give us some background to Toy Matinee as well for those that don't know.
okay. Toy Man. Well, this was after the Madonna record. It was at this point. Basically, this was 1989, and Pat Leonard had, over the last couple of years, had with True Blue and then Like a Prayer, he'd earned Warner Brothers $500 million, and so they basically said, "Whatever you want, mate. Whatever, just do whatever you want." And he just said, "Well, I want to do an album. I've always wanted to make a sort of slightly proggy album." And you got to remember, this is not a proggy time at
Yeah.
all, and he is not associated with that sort of thing. And so I was the first person who came to say, "Guy, do you want to do a band project with me?" I went, "Yeah, I'm sure." And so we put this band together. He met this guy, Kevin Gilbert, who was amazing talent, who was in some band, Giraffe or something. And then we found Brian McLeod, this drummer, and then Tim Pierce, who's this amazing Uber session guitarist in LA, played on everything. And we put this band together, and we basically had months in Pat's studio. Pat's studio was amazing. And Bill Bottrell, who had engineered the Madonna record, was brought in to produce. And he kept everything all very analog, very cool. There were very few synths and anything like that. Bill went on to produce, was also producing Michael Jackson and stuff. And like, it was an amazing little cast. So we had months writing this album. And what's funny is that Bill Bottrell, at the end of this, then he had a studio in Pasadena and he started this little jam thing where people would come around, drink tequila, and everyone would just jam songs. And it was called Tuesday Night Music Club. And Kevin Gilbert, the singer of Toy Matinee, singer and co-writer, used to go there with his girlfriend, Cheryl Crow.
Oh, wow.
And that's where Tuesday Night Music Club comes from. It grew out of Toy Matinee.
Wow.
So there you go. And the thing that I found is, and you were right when you say you didn't hear it, it's a completely unknown record in England. In America, it's kind of like my Velvet Underground record. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
300 people heard it, they all started bands. I get more kudos from that record from musicians in America than anything I've done. This when I met guys from Beck's band, I met the people who work with Dre. Everyone's like, "Whoa, Toy Matinee," and I am proudest of it. I mean, I co-wrote a few of the songs,
Mhm.
but it's more, but I think it's because and there's one other album that has the same thing, which is where because I had months, because it was like a band thing. There's that thing of having months to work on your lines,
Yeah.
and they're so good because it's the thing I kind of hate about being a session dog is that you get hired depending on how quick you are. It's all about being the quickest one. We can get him, he'll be in and out. And that's great. You come up with something, but it's like the amount of times you go and you play something, and when you go, you're driving home, you think, oh, fuck, I could have gone,
Yeah.
oh,
Could
damn,
have
why
done
didn't I
this.
try?
Yeah.
Oh, shit, I could have done that. And I still get that, you know. And so that's what's great was this. You had all the time just hone your lines. And so that's why I'm really, really proud of my bass player. I mean, for people who don't know that I did, during COVID, I did my YouTube videos, lockdown licks, and I got so many requests for those songs. So there's about 3 or 4 of them I did. It was great to revisit them as well. So yeah, so it was, and Kevin sadly had tragically died just a couple of years after this, and so it's a project that never quite got the sort of sunlight it deserved. But I still, and anyone, I mean, like yourself, whenever people hear about it, they go, oh my God, what is this record? Because it's like, it's got a bit of, it's kind of psychedelia with a bit of Steely Dan,
Yeah.
with a bit of LA, with a bit of, it's a really, really nice hodgepodge of stuff, I think.
Yeah.
And
And
some
as you say,
amazing players, some amazing guitar from Tim Pierce as well. There's a couple of solos, which are just, whoa. And it's also, I'd say, Brian McLeod, he was in a band called Wire Train at the time. And this was at the time, especially, we're in LA, everything was super muso, especially when it came to drums. Everyone wanted to be Jeff Porcaro or Vinnie Colaiuta or something. And Brian, I think, really deserves a lot of credit. Brian was one of the first people who went, you know what? Ringo. And and it's like it's interesting because and there's this definite thing in the 90s that there's this total reappraisal amongst drummers and everything was and people were just going, you know what, Ringo. And that's where I think Ringo got his due and his place in the firmament where people play in the same way as I think Nick Mason is now getting. So
there you go.
discuss, there you go, kids, discuss.
We'll leave that one there.
Take that down the pub.
Okay. So in terms of that record, then, what's your standout songs on that? What songs do you look back most fondly on?
Oh, Last Plane Out is the one. That was my title. And but yeah, no, it's also there's something to do with the bass. It's octave pedal. That was back in the middle of my octave pedal days, and there's the bass sound. There was this sound that Bill did, which is something. I mean, I don't want to get techie, but it's like a chorus thing where he had two slightly delayed sounds, slightly different delay, left and right, and with different levels of modulation. And it's especially on headphones or anything, the bass sound is fucking unreal. So there you go. But all of it, I mean, it's all got. There's one funny little thing. Is there's a song called "Things She Said,"
Yes.
and it's got a line in it which is every other day store promise, right? And where that comes from is that Pat used to go in and just when he had an idea for a melody, he'd go in and go la 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 la, as people do. He'd just do a rough vocal of just going la 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 la. But he had this thing that he always used to go la la da 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 day store, day store. And this thing day store always came in all of his scat vocals. And I began to think, what's a day store? Was it just a shop that's open during the day? And I just said somewhere we have to have a lyric that actually has day store in it. So that's why that's there.
Fantastic stuff. Love it. So I recommend
There's
everyone check
also,
out
by the
Toy Matinee.
yes, there's a song called "Turn It On Salvador," and I don't know why they scrambled it up so much because we had this line as a joke because there was so much fun sitting around laughing, writing lyrics. A lot of it was crazy, surrealist stuff, and this song was about Salvador Dali, so it was, and we are just throwing in as much and I might have come up with the line "Holy rotting donkey carcass, Batman." And we said, well, let's get, what's his name? The guy who was Robin to say it. And we did. We got, and well, I can't remember his name. So the guy who was Robin in the 60s Batman show actually says that line. But then for some reason they decided to make it all tribute. It goes, hey, yes, and it's all backwards and upside down. So you can't actually tell who it is. But
Oh,
there you go.
oh, there you go. I didn't even notice it was the actual Robin there.
There you go.
It
There you
just
go.
shows you. It just shows you. So there you go. That is choice number two, Toy Matinee with the album Toy Matinee. Let's move on to choice three then. This is an interesting one. 1992, I think this one came out, called Growing Up in Public by Jimmy Nail. So for people on the other side of the pond, let's fill us in on Jimmy Nail and this record.
Well, Jimmy Nail was a very, very famous actor. Brilliant actor. Famed from a series called Auf Wiedersehen, Pet. You know, various other hits, Spender and everything. He was in Evita, the film, of course. But he was a fantastic singer. He'd always sung. He'd been in bands before he was an actor. And he'd had hits before, didn't he? He had a fantastic version of Love Don't Live Here Anymore and stuff like that. And I got to me, it was all part of the same period. When I was living in LA, when I was doing the Toy Matinee stuff, and Madonna, I used to share a place with my manager, was his place, Tarquin. Gosh, we were up on Benedict Canyon, which is why, by the way, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is my favorite film ever, because have you seen it?
Yes.
Right, because you know where they are, Los Cielo Drive, you know where the Manson house is and where he lives. That's where we lived.
Oh,
That's literally where I lived, like 50 yards away. So I'm
very
just
cool.
like, oh my God, yeah. Anyway, and just up there, a lot of English people up there, and just up the road was Ian Lafrene, from Clement Lafrene, the legendary English comedy writers who'd written Auf Wiedersehen, Pet and everything. And they actually wrote Auf Wiedersehen, Pet in Beverly Hills, which I think is the funniest thing. How they managed to do that. And Jimmy was staying with Ian because he was writing this new TV series called Spender, which is a gritty cop drama set in Newcastle, written in Beverly Hills.
Beverly Hills. Yep, obviously.
Yeah, and Jimmy I knew anyway because I'd met him when I appeared on the Tube with Womack and Womack, the TV show, and he came and sung with us years before, and so we were hanging out and stuff, blah blah blah, and so when he came to making an album, we had a mutual friend, Danny Shogo, who I'd worked with a lot, keyboard player, arranger, producer. And so he asked us to sort of write this thing with him. And Jim, apart from being a great singer, I've got to say, Jimmy's got an amazing ear for a melody. Amazing. Okay. He comes up, you know, the melodies on that, it's like almost kind of null level. And so we wrote this, and it's very much of its time. But what's funny, and we had a massive hit, of course, you know,
Yes.
Ain't No Doubt. But what's funny is for a sort of pop album by an actor, this record has an unbelievable amount of absolute gobsmacking all-time guitar gods, right? We've got George Harrison playing slide on one song. We've got David Gilmour doing a solo on one song. We've got Gary Moore doing a solo on one song. We've got Elliot Randall doing a solo on one song. I mean, it's off the chart, the guitar on this record, and the rest of it's all me doing my pseudo Nile Rodgers thing.
Just me. Yeah. So did you think at the time in the recording, because obviously you mentioned Ain't No Doubt, that was an absolutely huge single, as you said. I think it was number one for a long time and
Yeah,
things like
5
that.
weeks.
So
Yeah.
5 weeks, there you go. Did you think at the time it was going to be as big when you hear something like that being put together?
I remember saying I didn't think they should put Ain't No Doubt out because I thought it was too obvious and I thought it wouldn't be a hit. And annoyed. No, I didn't think it was good. I thought it was maybe going to do well because I mean they're great pop songs. There's about 5 really great pop songs, but also there's one. It's one of my favorite little moments. There's a classic little Gilmour moment, and we had our big kind of what would be your charity single thing called "Only Love," and it is your classic like massive, you know, African chanting, the full lot. And I thought and when we were doing it, it's just like, oh man, it's just crying out for a Gilmour, isn't it? So I asked David if he'd come down and play on it. And it's just one of those classic bits of God where David just comes in, plugs in, woof, there's the sound. Plays a solo. Goes, all right, let me try another one. Try another one. Try another one. And he did like 7 takes, right? And then it gets the 7th take. And he finished it. We're thinking, oh man, that's good. Surely that's it. And he goes, right, put that on the right and then get the first one up on the left. So we play the take 1 and take 7, split left and right. It's the same.
Wow.
And it's amazing. Yeah. It's like he knew he had it straight out the box, but he has to make sure. So he did all those ones and he gets to 7 and he's remembered it.
Phenomenal.
Yeah.
Absolutely phenomenal. Wonderful. So that's choice 3 then. We've gone from Madonna to Toy Matinee to Jimmy Nail, and you've mentioned David Gilmour a few times. So choice number 4 is Pulse, Pink Floyd, of course. Huge, huge live album. So tell me all about this one.
Well, it's just the funny thing is anything I've ever played with that's Pink Floyd related, people will just go, "Man, that's the best sounding thing I've ever heard." Gig, and it's like, and I will never know. I've just had to take people's word for it. I've never heard them. I don't know. I mean, yeah. When I went to see Pink Floyd doing The Wall, they sounded amazing. But ever since then, I don't know. I've been up there. It doesn't sound that great up there. Let me tell you. And it's the same with the Saucers. Same with it was funny enough. It was Jeremy Stacey, the great drummer. Who you just said to me, anything you ever see that's related to Pink Floyd is the best sounding sound you've ever heard. And I just still get kind of chilled when I listen to this. It's the thought that that's what we sounded like. I just can't. It's just extraordinary. There's no fixes on that record. That's us. That's just us. Yeah.
That's unusual for a live recording, isn't it?
Yeah, I know they're usually kind of, nothing to do with anything. It's funny now, because it's so easy, because you don't have to make a live album now, if you know what I mean. Like, everything's being recorded anyway. It's just like, you don't have to set anything up. Everything's automatically being done. You want to make an album? Sure, let's make an album. And you take anything from any night. You can take, But so yeah, that's it. I just can't believe that's what we sounded like.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's that. I mean, it's probably it's probably a waste of a choice, really, using that. So, but I think hopefully, well, maybe that can kind of we can add Bête Noire to that. So it's like 2 halves.
Yes, so there's half a choice. Yeah, 4.5.
Because Bête Noire definitely deserves to be in there.
So a bit more about Pulse then, because obviously you'd been working with the guys from Pink Floyd for a few years before this big tour as well, and you've been on tour with them a lot, and you've done an awful lot. So, how did your role within the band kind of evolve up to this kind of stage?
I don't know. I mean, I think I was only now kind of taking it as seriously as I should. I'd finally, on this, I'd finally bought precision bass, which is what you really should be playing if you're playing old Floyd stuff. I can't really. It's all a bit of a blur. It's I can't really think. I mean, the thing is that this was at the end of the tour. This was Earl's Court. These were the last. We've been on tour for months, and I kind of never really thought then that it's. I mean, only now I'm aware of it. Like when I play shows with David, you're aware of how high the stakes are, and I find it extraordinary that, especially after having. What's interesting is going back to playing with David after having been playing with the Sorcerer's Secrets, where with the Sorcerers it's like you just muck about, do whatever you want, and it's good because that's I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that in a good way, because this is sort of Pink Floyd as pop group, as a very human thing, as it was back in the days. Whereas when you go back to with David, it's every note counts. It's like you don't dick about with this. It's which is really nice, in a completely different way. And I think a lot of that is, I'm an old man now, and I guess I appreciate that in a way that I didn't back then. But I like to think that at the time of Pulse, I had the balance about right, in that it's vibier than just the Pink Floyd bass playing, but it's still kind of curating it, if you will.
I was going to ask you that because obviously Pink Floyd, all the music that came before, incredible back catalogue they had, and Roger Waters is very iconic as well. So when you step in to play that music, and obviously no two people play exactly the same, so you're obviously going to bring your own tone to it. So were you kind of told to stick to what Roger had done, or were you given the license to kind of move it slightly into your style?
Not at all. And on the, I mean, like on that first tour, this on the on Delicate Sound of Thunder. No, I mean, it's shocking some of the stuff I've done. I'm not surprised. David went back when they remastered it. David edited some of my stuff out, which I used to be horrified at. But it's like, well, yeah, actually, thanks. Um, but then it's all you got to remember. This is in the days. This was before tribute bands. This was before it was everything. This was the '80s. And it's like we were in our time. You've got to be in your time, haven't you? So I think one should be forgiven a bit for that. Because early '90s was a funny time. Is it? It's the Division Bell got knocked off #1 by Parklife. This is the birth of Britpop.
Britpop, yeah.
And all that. And we're coming out of that weird fallow period. They'd been what Suede and things like Massive Attack had just happened. There was a lot. Electronica was a big thing, and Floyd were very cool amongst the younger crowd, which they hadn't been before. So there was. So it was interesting. So I think like stylistically, some of the stuff I was doing was still kind of caught between two camps, which is things like Any Color You Like off Dark Side of the Moon is kind of, I noticed I do a bit of slapping in that. And you're thinking, actually, in '94, weren't really doing that anymore. It was kind of falling off. Actually, that's one point I would like to make. It's interesting about that is that what we would alternate. Second half, some nights would just be a sort of greatest hits thing with most of Dark Side of the Moon. You'd play most of Dark Side of the Moon. And then other nights, we would play Dark Side of the Moon, right, as a piece. And what's interesting is even though we were playing most of the songs, when you play Dark Side of the Moon as a piece, you play those songs differently. And I can't tell you what or how or why, but you do. I noticed for instance, in because there's two versions, like us and I mean they might have been both from Dark Side of the Moons or not from Dark Side of the Moons, but on the record and the video of Pulse, us and them is two completely different tempos.
Okay.
One's much faster than the other. And I'm wondering, and I wonder if one of that's because one of them's from a Dark Side of the Moon and one of them isn't. I've got a feeling that a slower one would be from a performance of Dark Side of the Moon. So it's just interesting.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Fascinating how that comes together. Lovely stuff. So that's choice 4, and we move on to choice 5, and it's a recent one, just last year. David Gilmour's most recent album, Luck and Strange. So why have you included this amongst your 5?
It was a week with Steve Gadd.
Okay.
Really don't need to say anything else. Well, everything about it was wonderful. I mean, it's and what was nice was being at the. It felt like it was a bit special at the time, and it's proved to be that. It's been much as I loved On an Island, Rattle That Lot. They were great. They're great. There's something about this record in that David has absolutely cemented something here. It's like he's pulled away, and it's like he now owns his past. It doesn't own him.
Yep.
It's, and I mean, there was when we went out and played this stuff. I mean, you play all these songs, you get them up on their feet. They play so well live. It's like people go mad for Scattered, which most people say, so many people say is the best thing of his solo career. It's like it's his best solo since back in the day. I'm not going to say that one just in case, but. There's just something about, and it was a fantastic band because Rob Gentry, keyboard player, is without a doubt one of the most sensitive and like soulful, nuanced keyboard players I've ever worked with. I know Rick would have been really happy with him, playing. Steve, what can you say? Steve Gadd, there's something about, I mean, it's like every bass drum kind of wounds you. There's just something so delicate. And the way he skips about the kit, I think what's nice for Dave, especially with the pace of a lot of David's songs, is that out of all of those elite drummers, he's the closest to Nick Mason, I would say. So, it was just everything about that album was, and the resulting tour. I mean, here's the thing, Greg Fillinganes plays keyboards in the live band. He came through London the other night playing with Toto, and we all went. The whole band went for a band reunion because we just love each other. And the chance of all seeing each other and being in the same room was just too much to pass up. So yeah, it's just a really special record. That there you
A
go.
very special record, and it went to number one as well, didn't it? It's another a big hit
Yeah,
for him as well, which is
yeah.
fantastic. In terms of working with David, then obviously you've worked with him for many years now. What is he like as a person to create with? Does he come with songs? This is how we're going to do it, or is it more a collaborative process when he comes in with things? I mean, how does that sort of thing work with him?
No, he very much has it. I mean, he can play. I mean, things like this. The more sort of interesting bass on the album is actually done by him. I mean, I'm actually kind of really concerned now with. I mean, ironically, we're just like not doing too much, not getting in the way, to the point where actually there's a couple of fills on the album which he told me to do because I was just too worried about doing
Yeah.
anything. Um, but yeah, no, I mean, he's got such a ridiculously kind of big picture way of thinking. He sees it all in widescreen. Um, so yeah, it's always been like that. But then he likes to work from jamming. I mean, that's what I love is that there's the fact that I'm playing with Rick on this album because there's one of the tracks which came out of us having a jam in
Oh,
David's
great.
barn like 16 years ago. So yeah.
There you go. And obviously, you've worked with so many incredible musicians and you've listed so many now. But in terms of David Gilmour, I mean, you're obviously biased because you've worked with him for so long and
Yeah.
you're such good friends. But in terms of him as a guitar player, where would you rank him amongst the
Oh
pantheon
no,
of
no, no.
greats?
No, no, utterly. It's as you know, as lead guitarist, he's my favorite because it's he makes you cry. It's as simple as that. Also, it's just just all the sound. It's just there's no one who kind of gets sound quite like that. Um, but yeah, I mean, but I love what I love is it's like he wasn't really hung up on guitars and guitarists so much, except for one man, and that was Jeff Beck, and I love that about him,
It's funny.
because
There's a
they're
lot of
actually not some
guitarists
sort.
love Jeff Beck, isn't there? It's
Yeah, yeah,
incredible.
yeah. But they were mates. And he used to hang out with Jeff, and it's and I love that because it's quite funny because musically he's miles away. David's not really interested in sort of super complex jazzy stuff, but yeah, there you go.
There you go. Did he ever give you any incredible advice that you've kept on board and it's always stuck with you throughout your career?
He's given me tons and tons of bits of advice. More to do with like losing bad habits than anything else. Yeah, but I can't think of anything. I'm not giving it to you. It's mine.
Fair enough. You keep that for yourself. Well, Guy, it's been another pleasure chatting with you again this time. Your five records that you've chosen for us are some incredible records again. Madonna with Like a Prayer, Toy Matinee with Toy Matinee. We've got Jimmy Nails Growing Up in Public, Pulse from Pink Floyd, and as we just finished off there, the wonderful David Gilmour record from last year, Luck and Strange, with a special mention for the Bryan Ferry one as well, which catapulted
Thank you.
you
Yes.
into everything. So thank you so much for your time, Guy Pratt.
Oh, you're very welcome. Cheers.